Okay, we're on the air. We're live. All right, I got to prepare you a little bit for what's coming up. And what's coming up, right? Chapter 11 is pistis. Pistis, to be persuaded or to have been persuaded. Yeah, oh boy. All right, I guess I'll tell you, we'll hit it when we get to 29 especially, but I think I already mentioned it before. Some of this, if you haven't noticed, Hebrews is probably the most complex book in the whole New Testament. There is no more erudite nor difficult book. Because, number one, it's the Logos to telos. It's a complex Logos to telos. And it is also something that's a culmination of ideas. A culmination of the ideas that have been developed, in Paul's writing. Paul only wrote from 52 to 54 AD, like 2 years. The first Thessalonians was about 52 AD. Then he went to Rome, and they croaked him 54, 55 AD. Unless you believe in a late Paul, which is probably not quite reasonable. But anyway, historically, Paul only wrote his letters for 2 years. He was developing his theology, of course, before that, or his ideas. And then you have the apostolics. And if you notice, it's not all song and dance, right? It's not all fun and games. There are disagreements among the apostolic fathers. There's disagreements with Paul and what they say. And Hebrews tries to resolve those issues. Also, one of the reasons that the reasons that Martin Luther did not like Hebrews, it's one of the 5 he didn't like, is because it resolves those issues to a degree. And he didn't necessarily, it's not that he didn't want to resolve issues. He was working on issues on his own at the time, and there are also issues with the Catholic Church, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go into too much detail, but they come up, kind of as we go through this. The words of the day today, and by the way, Al said he found a word he thought was different. I say, if you find something you think is different, print it out. I have all of Strong's and Vines here. I use Strong's, Vines, and Woodhouse. That's my standard. So I'm using Strong's and Vines. So if these notes I give you are from Strong's and Vines. Now I have parsed them to make them easier for you to understand, because in Strong's and Vines, for example, this first word, charis, that's that CH sound, chai, caritos, okay, this is charis, the basis is charis, and you notice in charis it says charis. This is actually, what is it? I've got my notes in here on charis. I got to dig in and find them, because I got other notes here too. But for charis, this is what it actually says. Charis, it's 5485 in the Strong's number. It gives you the pronunciation, and now that's the pronunciation we think. The Strong's is probably post-Erasmunsian, I believe. I don't remember, but post-Erasmunsian pronunciation. Charis is from Strong's 5463. Graciousness as gratifying a manner or act, abstract or concrete, literal, figurative, or spiritual, especially divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in life, including gratitude. And then it gives the King James Version translations of it. And then I also have chario, which is 5463, it gives the pronunciation chario, a primary verb to be cheerful, calmly, happy, well off, and personally, especially the salutation, meaning a parting, be well. And then it gives the King James Version thing. So what I do is when I research, I take every word and I break down the Strong's and Vines. In some cases, I give you only, like ones that are normative, like ho, H-O, or he, which are the 2 declensions. H-O is a neutrum, and H-E is the feminine for thee. So when I have an article, and you know that Greek does not have a defined article, so there is no A in Greek. There's no definite article a, there's indefinite article the. So, or did I say that backwards? Anyway, in Greek, so for those words, I don't necessarily go look at every one of them, because once I find and see it in the Strong's, I know what it is. But if you find one that's different, tell me. But I don't think my sources are wrong, and I try to research it pretty validly. So bring it up if you find something that looks different. But I'm giving you everything. Now, what I did for you in charis is I gave you charis. I took away the pronunciation because I need more space, and I put in from. And what I did is I put in parentheses from chario, so I took out the reference to the other Strong's number. A primary verb to be cheerful, calmly happy or well off, and personally, especially the salutation on meeting or parting, be well, gracious, is gratifying, matter, act. And then when you go to the end, you see literal, figure, or spirituals, and then especially divine influence, and it's whatever. And then you should see a closed parenthesis, that's up at the top there in the second thing, that closes that from chario. And then charis. Charis is graciousness, as gratifying. Now, the problem with charis, okay, and here I got a problem with Strong's. I got a serious problem with Strong's, and you should too. Okay, it comes from chario. Chario means to be cheerful. It is a greeting in ancient Greece. So if I see you every morning, I say, hey, chario. And if I see you, I say chario. And if I'm saying bye-bye, I say chario. And you know what that became today?
Cheers.
Ciao. Well, cheers. Yeah, they say cheers. You're correct. English, cheers. But in Greece, you say what? Ciao. That's Italian. Ciao. Ciao, Bella. Ciao, right? Ciao. It's exactly the same in Greek, in ancient Greek even. So why would an ancient Greek word, charis, which comes from the primary verb chario, which means a greeting, all of a sudden become the divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in the life, including gratitude? Now, why would that happen? It never happened. It won't happen. It doesn't happen. There is no such thing. That's made up. It's totally made up. That's not what it means at all. What do you think it means? It means a greeting. It means graciousness. It is not a magic word. What have we done to it?
Inflated it.
Yeah, we've taken a common word that's in common usage in Greek that means something, really, really means something in Greek, and done what with it? We've made this, what's that?
We turned it into a doctrine.
Yeah, we've turned the whole word. Yeah, if I go into church right now and say the word grace, what did I just do? There's more books on grace than this could fill this whole library. If I were to try to define grace, it would be like, dude, I don't have the time in my life to read to define grace according to the church. So I've taken a very simple, specific meaning in concrete Greek and turned it into something that is completely abnormal and perverted almost. Because, for example, and perverted may be too strong a word, but for example, when the angel came to Mary, what did he say to her?
Ciao.
Ciao. He said, chario, grace be to you. Now, what did we translate it? Grace. Oh my goodness, he said grace. Well, he just said,
Hello.
hi, good morning, right? Yes, sir.
Would there be a better word in Greek? Is there such a word for grace? Because conceptually, that may not have existed.
Probably the closest word, and this is off the cuff because I've not studied this on purpose because it would completely mess up our life living in pursuit of happiness in terms of concreteness in Greek. But I suspect the closest word to grace that we could probably find in Greek that they would say is dike.
Dikesona.
Well, we add to it dikesuna, I think it's E or A, whatever. Dike means justice, right? And dike suna means, we translate righteousness, but it is more precisely balance. It's the balance of justice. And the Greeks would probably say, to them, they're always looking for that balance. But we note that in Greek, we note in Greek, the Greeks always want charis, where the Romans always want, remember, doxa, and the Hebrews are always looking for shalom, peace, arena in Greek. So I would guess that the Greeks would say that charis is the result of dike suna, or dike, right? Because if you're balanced, if everything's balanced, everything's happy, then guess what we can be? Cheerful, calmly happy, well off, salutation, well, gracious, right? In other words, okay, usually when I greet somebody, I say, "Hi, how you doing?" And what do you say?
Huh?
Great, right? Very rarely someone will say, "Oh, life's terrible. You know, it's horrible," right? But in most cases, we say great. Now, the Greeks would say, charis means what? You can truly say that from your heart, right? Truly say graciousness from your heart. And I think that's their point, right? If I greet you with charis, that should mean everything is balanced, everything is good, everything's great. But we have turned it into divine influence upon the heart, its reflection in life, including gratitude, and it's a greeting in Greek. Holy smoke, that's like saying good morning. Good morning is especially the divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in life, including gratitude. Well, holy smoke. I didn't know that, but I guess it does. We can do that, yeah.
I know a number of people that when you say good morning, they'll say, "How are you?" And they'll say, "I am blessed." So that was a nice greeting as well.
That probably is, except, and I don't disagree with that. However, I do want to point this out. Okay, Greeks are super concrete, and we are really euphemistic. Okay, we're not as euphemistic as the Hebrews or the Japanese, but we're pretty euphemistic. So, what's a likelihood of a very concrete thinking person if I walk up to them and I say, "How you doing?" What do you, and they're not doing well, what do you think they'll say?
Okay.
Life sucks today. Right? Because that's a concrete person. Life is terrible today. Life is really bad. On the other hand, if they're really happy, in the Greek, they might say, charis. On the other hand, what's a euphemistic person going to tell you? Every time.
Fine.
I'm fine. Life is good. Life is happy. Right? I mean, this is the way of the world. I'm not kidding you. You got to think about this and take your blinders off. Take your cultural blinders off. Think about how these people would express themselves as they are. And again, I'll go back. I really think we need to be cautious, especially, and this goes back to what I told you I'm going to prep you for. When you have translations and there suddenly are more words being used in the translation to translate very simple words, what does that indicate to you?
They're trying to impress a different meaning on you.
Okay, you said it, I'm not going to go that far, but I think that may be true. The thing is that the more complex you see a translation, usually the more difficult the translator had in trying to express it in a simple way. And therefore they found out some, especially in English, they're going to find a very euphemistic way to try to develop that. And guess where we're going to see that big time? When we get to 11, it's going to really build into that because there's a lot of interesting things going on in 11 to make it fit. Just saying. The other thing we have is when you begin to see, especially in a translation, like for example, definitions. read definitions, right? In the definitions you have like definition 1, definition 2, definition 3, right, of love or whatever. Well, when you start seeing definitions that are a paragraph long, what do you think?
I had no idea that word was that complex.
Bingo, bingo. And sometimes you go, what? So when you see in the King James or the Strong's and it says, you know, especially the divine influence on the heart and its reflection in life, including gratitude. You go, look, I'm not even sure what that means. Are you sure what that means? The divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in life?
All I said was hi.
Precisely! You got it. You just hit the nail on the head. Bang. So, when we start to see things, that's why what I try to do, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. I know this is not simple, but I'm trying to make it as simple as possible to try to make it fit within the context of what we got. Here's the other word. Charis, I had to put in charis. I love charis. What a cool word. I think it's a really cool word because it is as simple as it is. Which, in a concrete world, if I give you a very simple word, what does that mean? I think it's simple. The gospel is simple. And matter of fact, I think it's really funny. We've got the mystery of Christ. Did we do Ephesians? I think we did Ephesians, didn't we?
This morning.
And I think I've done Ephesians in classes. And when we did Ephesians, I told you, Ephesians is all about the mysterion of Christ. And in Ephesians, we have the mystery of Christ. Well, you know what the mystery of Christ is. Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again. Why don't we do that? We do have it in some of our, if you go look, it is in our song. The song, it's in the song, the one before the communion words, the one that we don't do, that I wish we did every Sunday, but it's in that. We have taken it and put it in the song where almost every other liturgical church, they say the mystery of faith. And they say the mystery of faith at the end before communion, which is, I think, beautiful. But anyway, so the mystery of faith, the mysterion of Christ. Here's an interesting word. This, as I told you before, when you see this is an accent, accented sound, and this is eta. So the accent on eta, H-E, and I'm teaching you a little Greek here. I shouldn't probably teach you too much, right? H-E-G-S-A, that's with an accent, M-E-N-O-S. Hegesemenos. Hegesemenos, but actually the word basis, the word I gave you, Hegeiomai. Hegeiomai. This is a pretty easy word. I'll let you out. As you can do, you can like take Greek words and you move them out. This is a strengthened form of ago. Ago. Ago is a basic verb meaning to lead. It means to lead, period, dot. To lead. This is a strengthened form of to lead. Hegeomai. And as you can see, okay, so I've got it, strengthened form to lead. It means to lead. Specifically, this word means to lead. It implies to bring, to drive, reflexive. In a reflexive case, it means to go. Specifically, it means to pass, or figuratively to induce. To lead. Specifically to lead. And if you notice, it's translated account, chief, count, esteem, governor, judge, have, rule over, suppose, think. Is lead in there? Did the King James leave out lead as a translation for the word to lead? Now, why would that happen? Well, Shazam, it's because it's only used a couple of times, and one of the places it's used is in Hebrews. So anyway, we're talking about Hebrews, and specifically about the logos to telos. The logos to telos, and it's unstated telos, although we have found some stated telos in Hebrews, of Hebrews. We are right now in the law portion. They don't necessarily call this the law chapter, but this is the law chapter and how the law fits specifically into the sacrificial process. And also, as we've seen, the huge question of the day is, how do we worship this Christ guy? And How do we sacrifice? Because, remember, although we have forgotten, in the Messianic era, there is one sacrifice required, and that's the sacrifice of Thanksgiving. And we do the sacrifice of Thanksgiving. It's called the Eucharist. As a matter of fact, we even say it. Our sacrifice of Thanksgiving. Anyone notice those words? They're right there in the preamble to the Eucharist, to the Lord's Supper. This is our sacrifice of thanksgiving and praise. We are doing the Thanksgiving sacrifice, and that's why those words are there. So in this period, they have a problem because they're trying to figure out what that means and how to do that. We have 2,000 years of figuring it out, and we have John Chrysostom. John Chrysostom fixed it for us, and by the way, I love it because I love the Spanish Rite. You know, not Spanish Rite, the Scottish Rite. You know, we did the Scottish Rite today. The third part of our thing is the Scottish Rite. That's the one with the chanting vocalization. It's the first one in English, the first liturgy in English that we have that is a musical liturgy. And it's beautiful. The Scottish Rite is done by Anglicans. I don't think the Catholics do Scottish Rite, but the Anglicans do it like crazy. The old Anglicans, new Anglicans, the Episcopals have dumped it a long time ago. They're lost anyway, I think. But there are some other groups a lot of other groups in Christianity, because the other rites you have the Scottish Rite, you have the basic Latin Rite, which we have, but it's translated right. And then there's the Latin Rite, and there's another one. Anyway, we have four. We have a modern, we have the Latin translation, the Scottish, there's that other one, and then there's a later one. Anyway, but we've been talking about the law and sacrifice. I may have to draw the pictures up here, but let's see where we are. I'm not going to go back over this. We're at 28, but I want to, let me see, how far do I need to go back? We had the 125, let us not give up meeting together. It's not exactly what it says. Less leaving behind in some place the episynagogue, leaving of ourselves just the usage of some persons. Other things call us near. And so vast this more than as much as we look at the day it comes near enough to do something about. In our translation, it gives the impression that people are not meeting together. I think and I believe that it shows in the Greek that the opposite is happening. 26, if we deliberately keep on sinning after we've received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left. It's not exactly what it says. Here's literally assigning a reason if we miss the mark voluntarily amid our recognition of the truth, we leave behind the sacrifice because of a sin. We leave behind a sacrifice because of a sin. And you remember, we're talking about three things here. We're talking about, one, cleanliness. We're talking about, two, the antinomia, which is breaking the law. This is law breaking. And three, missing the mark. And I told you, you can live your whole life and not break the law, but can you miss the mark? Yeah, big time. That is basically the message of Jesus Christ and the message of Paul. Now, I want to mention this to you. I think this is, I'm going to mention this. It's an interesting subject. Remember when Jesus Christ said, it's not what comes into a man, it's not what comes into a man that makes him unclean. It's what comes out. Now, put your Greek blinders on. What comes out of a person?
Thoughts, speech.
Oh, that's totally euphemistic. What really comes out of a person?
Okay.
Well, we're not going to say that in church.
We can say it because it's true. Your bodily products come out. And in Greek, that's what Jesus meant specifically. Then in the next verse, he specifies what he means. What I want to clarify with you is the ideas of cleanliness. Because what Jesus was saying is, okay, teruma, remember teruma? Teruma is what we're talking about. Teruma is the Thanksgiving sacrifice. Teruma is the sacrifice made to God. And to eat teruma, you had to be clean. Now, in a Greek worldview, clean means your body is clean, right? In a Hebrew and an English viewpoint, what does clean mean? Your hearts.
It can mean a lot of things.
It can mean a lot of things. Your words, right? The words come out of a person too, right? Your words. And so, do you think Jesus was ignoring that part?
No.
But what do? We ignore the most obvious part, which is very interesting. Because in the case of cleanliness, Jesus was not saying that there's no reason for cleanliness. He was simply stating that in the question of teruma, it's not what comes in, it's what comes out. And you can take it from the very concrete, which I think is the primary way the Greeks would see it, to the totally euphemistic, which is a way that we and the Hebrews would accept or would think about it. Well, actually, I think the Hebrews would see it all the way. The Hebrews all spoke Greek, right? So the Hebrews would put their Greek hat on and go, well, he means physically. And then they'd put their Hebrew hat on and they'd say, oh, he means thoughts, right? So when we think about this is a really kind of important concept, because we believe that cleanliness, that is the mikvah, right? We believe that the mikvah, baptism, provides that cleanliness. And it works. It gives you cleanness forever, right? That's our view.
What about when women give birth? That comes out of your body too. How are we gonna sort that out compared to what you're saying there?
You are precisely right. As a matter of fact, it isn't, okay, I didn't list everything, but remember, you had to get the mikveh when a man emitted semen, and that's in the New Old Testament, so we can say it, he would have to go and take a mikveh, right? When a woman had menstruation, she would have to go and do the mikveh before eating teruma and before having sex with her husband again. These are requirements in the law, because those things which came out of a person were considered unclean. We do too. We think they're unclean. We don't talk much about it because that's part of our euphemistic society. But yes, you are precisely correct. And these are the things Jesus was not pronouncing that he didn't have to have cleanliness. Right? He was simply, in America, it states it for us in the gospel, which is really interesting. By this, Jesus said that all food is clean. Right? But he didn't say all the other reasons you did. See, okay. Look, we've been too stuck, I'm sorry, we were too stuck in our euphemism. Because when I say words to you, you immediately in your English brains, like me, we automatically think in our terms of our English euphemism, right? We don't go there. But you know what? The Greeks did. And Jesus did. And the Old Testament does. And the New Testament does. We just ignore it. Just saying. So that puts a capsule on what we're getting at here. 27. But only a fearful expectation of judgment for raging fire will consume the enemies of God. And remember I said literally, but some expect from receive frightful judgment and fire from the gods, heat if they intend to eat the covertly contrary to. This is not saying what our translation is saying. What it's saying is, and I'll re-express it and then we'll get to 28. I'll re-express this. The problem you have is all these people who came from Jerusalem, the guys who came from Jerusalem, they came to Alexandria. There was a temple, the big T. Here's the Galil. Here, and I put it here. It's really right above it. Here's Babylon. Okay. Here's the Essenes. Essenes had a temple. It was an illegal temple. The Alexandrians had a legal temple. All these Christians came down to Alexandria They had a legal temple. They were able to go through the whole process from mikvah to the ascension sacrifice, to the sin and guilt sacrifice, to the priest sacrifice, to the Thanksgiving sacrifice. And guess what they were doing every day? All that. And now they go to Alexandria. And at Alexandria, they kicked them out of synagogues. We know that. So they had an epi-synagogue. So what are they doing? They're all bonding together. Because, well, wouldn't you? I mean, if you left, okay, these people speak funny. I mean, they're speaking Hebrew, actually speaking Aramaic. Hebrew is not a spoken language at the time. They're speaking Aramaic, and they're speaking Greek. But what do you sound like to them? The minute you open your mouth. Oh, you're from Brooklyn. Oh, you're from the Deep South. Oh, are you from Alabama? Are you from New Jersey? Are you from Minnesota? Right? The minute you open your mouth, they know where you're from. So what are they doing? They're all together. And then some of them are, guess what? Covertly going to the temple in Alexandria to participate in the Thanksgiving sacrifice. And that's what 27 is about. 27, but some expect to receive frightful judgment and fire from the gods. God's heat, if they intend to eat the covertly contrary to. In other words, they are going to the temple because that's what they did in Jerusalem. And what all of Hebrews is trying to tell them is, get out of your epi-synagogue and go and talk to your neighbors. Now we get to 28. Here's 28. Anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. And here we'll parse it. He, it's not he, it's tis, some. Some, that is added, despise, alitio, to set aside. It's not to despise, but set aside. Moses' law, literally nomos, the laws. Aponesco, died off. Choris, at a space from mercy. Adikirmos, pity. Not mercy, but pity. Epi, over. 2 or 3, tres. Duo or tres. Witnesses, martos. Okay, here's a literal translation. Some set aside Moses' law, died off at a space from pity over 2 or 3 witnesses. I think this is pretty obvious. I need to give you a literal. Some set aside Moses' law, died off at a space from pity over 2 or 3 witnesses. How did they set aside Moses' law? How did those people that are covertly going to the temple set aside Moses' law? What was Moses' law?
We had to do it at the temple.
You had to do it at the temple. You had to do it at the temple. And what he's telling them, I don't think this is a warning. I don't think this is a warning as much as it is an observation. So he's saying that, look, you know, we're not condemning you. We know you're doing this, right? But it's not Moses' law. You're not following Moses' law, number 1. So what law should you follow? Right? That's the answer. That's the answer we all want. What law should we follow? And this is Deuteronomy 17:6, 19, 15. I give it to you. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Deuteronomy 17, you can read the, well, okay, I'll give you a little bit of context. In 1, do not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or sheep that has any defect or flaw. If a man or woman living among you in one of the towns the Lord gives you is found doing evil in a violation of the commandment, contrary to my command, this is 3, has worshipped other gods, bowing down to them, or to be the sun, moon, or the stars of the sky. 4, and this has been brought to your attention, then you must investigate it thoroughly. If it's true and it's been proved, it's a detestable thing that's been done in Israel. Take the man or woman who's done this evil deed to your city gate and stone that person to death. And then it says 6, on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a man shall be put to death, but not one shall be put to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. This is the context. And what the authors are doing is warning them because it is against the law of Moses. They're doing it because they're trying to account for they're trying to do the Thanksgiving sacrifice, and they don't have. You can see the problem, right? Paul said, eat anything sacrificed to idols, apostolic followers. And who are these guys probably following? Paul or the apostolic followers? The apostolic fathers. because they came from Jerusalem, and that's where the apostolic fathers had the greatest strength or power, right? Paul was more into the Greeks around. Now, there's lots of Greeks here, and they're all Greek speaking, but Paul's influence was not quite as strong. See? Now, I told you we think the writers may be Apollos, and Apollos was a really strong disciple of Paul's. So where do you think Apollos stands in this? Apollos is trying to help him, right? He's trying to give him Paul's ideas. A lot of people thought or think, I don't think most scholars think this is a Pauline letter, but we have thought in the past this was a Pauline letter. You know that, right? You've been maybe taught that. But it's not a Pauline letter. It has at least two authors. We know that because of the inferences in it. But even more than that, this is trying, you notice, Pauline letter because it has a lot of Paul's ideas in it. Where did it get the ideas? Not from the apostolic fathers, they didn't. They got it from Paul. Anyway, the other one is, let's see, Deuteronomy chapter 19. I'll read the first verse. When the Lord your God has destroyed the nations whose hand he is giving you, and when you have driven them out and settled in their towns and houses. See a parallel here? Is there a parallel? It wasn't that God destroyed, well, when the Lord your God has destroyed the nations whose land he is giving you, and when you have driven them out and settled in towns and houses, then set aside for yourselves 3 cities, etc., etc. And then it goes to the end. It says, do not move your neighbor's boundary stone set up by your predecessors' inheritance you received in the land that God is giving you to possess. One witness is not enough to convict a man accused of any crime or offense he may have committed. A matter must be established in testimony of 2 through witnesses. And it goes on about malicious witnesses and such. So, let's go to 29. 29 is the complex. Here's a warning. The more words are added, the more complex the terms, the more fitting the translations, fitting. I'm fitting a translation. I have a hole I need to fill. And I'm going to fill that, I'm going to fit that no matter what, right? So I'm going to make sure it fits. I mean, theologically or doctrinal or ideas. All right, let's look at it. This is what it says. How much more severely do you think, and this is a really long statement, how much more severely do you think a man deserves to be punished who has trampled the Son of God underfoot, who has treated as an unholy thing the blood of the covenant that sanctified him, and who has insulted the Spirit of grace? Let's parse it. Of how much is posos? How much? It's pretty close. How much sorer? The word is cherion, more evil. Punishment, temero, vindication. Wait a sec. Temorio, vindication, is not punishment. Suppose ye, dokeo, think ye, shall he be thought worthy? Okay, shall he be thought worthy is in one word, axio, to deem. To deem entitled. Who, it's actually ho, so the can be a ho, who, sorry. The can be who, because who is like, the is, it can be a article in a language. Who's a question article, but it's ho. The half trodden underfoot. Half trodden underfoot is kata pateo, to trample down. Down. It literally means down path. Down path. We're talking about tin horos, the way, down path. The ho, son, huios, offspring, of, it's not of, it's ho, that's, can be. Theos, it depends on the genitive term. So if it's a genitive term, of is good article, preposition. We call it preposition, it's actually an article. And kai, hath counted. Hath counted. It's heji emei, to lead. Now, how do I get hath counted out of lead? I don't know. The ho, blood hamia of is added, the covenant, the diatheke, the disposition, wherewith is not wherewith, it's in who Hos is very good for who. H-O-S. He is added, was is added. Sanctified is to make holy. The word sanctified to make holy, that's, I think, hagios. Yeah, hagiazeo. I did not put that in your translation, so it's hagiazeo. To make holy. And is added, unholy. It's not unholy. It's koinos, common. Common thing is added. And hath is added. Done is added. Despite. Inubrizio. It's not despite, it's to insult. Now, how did I get despite from insult? Unto is added. The is there, it's hope. Spirit, pneuma, breath of charis. Charis. We finally have a word we understand. Okay, so here's a direct, literal translation of this, word for word. How much more evil vindication deem entitled the trampled down path, the Son of God, and led the blood of the disposition, and who made holy a common, and insulted the breath, spirit of graciousness. Here's literally what it says. Try to parse this so it's understandable. How much more evil vindication deem entitled the trampled down path of the Son of God, who led the blood of the covenant, who made holy the common, and insulted the breath of graciousness. And not saying the Son of God insulted the breath of graciousness. There's a semicolon there. So let's see if we can parse this out. How much more evil vindication, okay, how much more evil vindication, in other words, being vindicted of evil, being changed of evil, deem entitled the trampled down path of the Son of God. Okay, so the trampled down path of the Son of God is King Hodos, right? So we're going down the trampled down path of the Son of God. So that means that, is it a lot or a little? Lots of people are trampling down this path of the Son of God. So the evil vindication. So in other words, you're being vindicated by going down the path of Tin Hodos, the path of the Son of God. Period. Who led the blood of the covenant, and who made the holy common, or he made the common holy. So who are the common? Usins, right? And the ones they're writing to. So the blood of the covenant was Jesus Christ. And that's what they said. That's what the whole other part of this was about, right? That Jesus Christ was a sacrifice for all. And that his blood made us priests and made us part of the Tin Hodos. So the blood of the covenant, Jesus Christ, and this trampled down path is Tin Hodos who made it. And what insulted the breath of graciousness? The breath of graciousness is what was prior to this. Now, I don't know. I think this is probably a good fit into this. The big deal, and this is what I think this is saying to us. The one who either has a foot in both camps or takes the Thanksgiving sacrifice in fear of retribution has trampled down the Son of God and insulted the Holy Spirit. That's what I think this is saying. That is a modern translation of this. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's trying to say that God has said that the old would replace the new, and they're not sure. They're not sure enough about the new to give up the old.
Yes.
I think that's what but he wants to be sure because the blood of Christ was more important than all this other stuff that pointed to his coming. And he's been here, he's made the ultimate sacrifice. We're free of the law that made us do all these sacrifices all the time.
I think you're precisely correct. Everything you said up to we're free from the sacrifices that we had to do all the time. I don't want to.
I know.
You are correct. You are not incorrect. But you are absolutely correct. We are free from all those other sacrifices we had to do all the time. And I think the author would say to your statement, hallelujah, you understand. Because that's what he's trying to say. Your feet are in both camps. But what you need to do is you need to bring this message of the gospel out of where you are, and you need to stop doing these things that could get you in real trouble, right? Now we don't believe that you can have spiritual trouble today.
Oh, really?
Oh no, we don't. No, I'm talking about as a culture. We don't believe in God as a culture. We don't believe God will give retribution as a culture. We believe that God is dead and God is not going to do anything to anybody. But you know what? They, no kidding, believed in the gods and in God. And they believed that if you did not, if you had a foot in both camps and you weren't following, remember, that they would kill people. I'm not talking about Teen Hodos, but they would kill, the Jewish people would kill you if you were found in Jerusalem breaking a Shabbat law on the Shabbat. They would kill you. If you were not sacrificing properly, they would kill you. If you went to Athens and you didn't follow the Athenian methods of worshiping the gods, they would kill you. In our culture, well, it's probably not necessarily a good thing to be killing people about God and your God that wants you to kill people because they're not doing, the right thing. Is probably, we would say, that's not what we see in Christ or in Christianity, right? I do want to remember Christ himself said anyone who teaches someone not to follow the Torah should have a millstone put around his neck and be drowned in the sea. And he also beat people out of the temple with cat o' nine tails. So these things are serious, and our society does not take them as serious. But these people believe this was serious, and I think it's serious too. Yeah, you had something?
Well, two things now, because you
Go.
messed up my train of thought. But
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, it's not that we're free from the other sacrifices, it's that the others have been done once and for all. And the ones who were going to the illegal temple had this tinge of doubt about the efficacy of it having been done once and for all.
Yes. And what I also want to point out, did you have another point too?
Yeah. My other point then was
Yeah.
that you just described gospel reductionism, where modern societies in the Christian church says, okay, if this part of the Bible does not directly affect the gospel or the plan of salvation, we get to ignore that.
Yeah. We see that all the time. What I want to do in your statement about those other sacrifices and your statement within the context, exactly what you said is right. The thing that I want to impress on you, and I think the writers of this would impress on you, and about the gospel reductionism, which I think is a valid problem in the modern era. The thing is that if you go back and look at Christianity and you look at the history of Christianity, what are we supposed to be about?
Spreading the gospel.
Spreading the gospel.
Well, spreading the gospel, and I would say spreading the gospel of the business of God. Are you critical to that?
Yes.
Yes, you are absolutely critical to that, because if you don't do it, who's going to do it? There may be a person who is never ever going to ever hear about Jesus Christ and never hear the gospel, and you are the only person that could ever talk to him about it. So yeah, you are critical. Without you, there is no gospel. Without you, God, that's why Jesus wept. That's why Jesus was so upset before he was crucified. He wasn't worried about being died. He wasn't worried about doing the greatest sacrifice for mankind. He was worried that we would screw it up by not following and doing what we're supposed to be doing. He was worried that we would mess up and not do what we were supposed to do. That's the whole point. So it is critical. In the young faith here, this is a young faith, and these people, although they're gaining lots of people, what happens if a generation stops yakking?
See it now.
It's the end of it, right? What happens if people forget it? And what I wanted to point out was, we would say, okay, you don't have to do all those sacrifices. I'm not going to hold myself up, but I'm going to say that when I do, every morning I do a morning prayer, okay? And in the morning prayer, I use the Anglican practice for morning prayer. In the Anglican practice for morning prayer, there's an ascension prayer. There's a confession. there is, between the introductions, there are all the pieces of doing the priestly or the temple type stuff. Now, why do I do that? Well, because I became used to it and because I think it fits. I would say that I don't do what I ought to be doing, because God would probably say, hey, you need to be doing that 10 times a day, right? You need to be remembering me in prayer and remembering me so it bothers you, right? So it bothers you. In other words, you're interacting with me. Okay? And that, I'm sorry, this is a theological point, but I think that comes straight out of Hebrews here. So anyway, translation. The one who has either a foot in both camps or takes the thanksgiving sacrifice in fear of retribution has trampled down the Son and insulted the Holy Spirit. Let's go to 30. And we'll find even more problems with 30 in translation, but that's okay. Here's what it says. For we know him who said, it is mine to avenge, I will repay. And again, the Lord will judge his people. Now, suddenly, this makes 100% sense in translation if you take what we just talked about, right? But let's parse it. 4, gar, signing a reason, we know, okay, close, idio, to see. Him is added, that is added, ho, hath said, epio, to speak or say, vengeance. It's not vengeance, it's edikesis. It's the word we had before, vindication. Vindication belongeth, is added, unto me. Emoi is mine. I, ego. Emi, ego. Will recompense. Ada potitomai. I will to requite good or evil. To requite good or evil. Saith, lego. Argues, thee is added, kurios. The kurios, Lord. And again, it's palen, once more, thee is added, kurios shall judge, krino, to distinguish his self, it's autos, it's a reflexive pronoun, his self, his people. So here's a literal translation. It's assigning a reason, we see who spoke. Vindication is mine. I will requite good or evil, argues kurios. And once more, kurios distinguishes his self people. Assigning a reason, we see who spoke. Vindication is mine. I will requite good for evil, argues kurios. And once more, kurios distinguishes his own people. Now, hold in mind what we just read and did. And let's go to Deuteronomy 32. 32, it's, did I mark it? Yeah, I did. I marked it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's 52 verses, but let's start. Listen, O heavens, and I will speak. Hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching fall like rain, and my words descend like dew, like showers on new grass, like abundant rain on tender plants. I will proclaim the name of the Lord. Oh, praise the greatness of our God. That's one. Then he goes on and on and on, talks about God, la, la, la. And then it goes here. Let's start with 30. How can one man chase 1,000, or two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them, unless the Lord had given them up? Lord is in caps, so it's Adonai. It's not Adonai, it's Yahweh. For their rock is not like our rock, as even our enemies can see. The vine comes from the vine of Sodom and from the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are filled with poison, their clusters with bitterness. Their wine is the venom of serpents and deadly poison of cobras. Have I not kept this in reserve and sealed it in my vaults? It is mine to avenge. I will repay. In due time their food will slip. Their day of disaster is near, and the doom rushes upon them. The Lord, that's all caps, Yahweh, will judge his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees their strength is gone and no one is left, slave or free. Now, look in context. Why and what did our writers do? They just helped us. They just solved an immense problem for us because they used the word They didn't use the word theos or God. They used the word kurios. Kurios always means kurios, Lord, means Jesus Christ. In the Septuagint, in the Hebrew Old Testament, in the Talmud, not Talmud, the Tanakh, in fact, not just Tanakh, in the Torah, who is this talking about? The Lord, with all caps, is Yahweh, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah. It's Yahweh. Will judge his people and have compassion on his servant when he sees their strength is gone. In the New Testament, it says, the Lord, Kurios, will judge his people. What did the authors just do?
Make God, Jesus God.
They made sure that we understood that Jesus Christ was God. They're calling Jesus Christ Yahweh. This is a direct inference. Because the quote they have, they intentionally changed it to Kurios. Because it's Theos. It's Yahweh. It's Lord. So the point, and this is a correct translation or correct thing from the Septuagint, but the point is that every person who knew anything about Hebrew and knew, and of course they all knew the Septuagint, right, would immediately say, you just call Jesus God. And so back to what we were talking about, foot in both camps. I don't need a foot in both camps. Why? Because Jesus is God and God was sufficient. Yes, sir.
Then if that's right, then whoever substituted the word vengeance when it really meant vindication gave it the wrong context entirely.
That is a precisely correct statement. As a matter of fact, because in the Hebrew, the words are euphemistic enough that you could probably get away from that, because this came out of, this is a quote from the Septuagint that is in Hebrews. But this is a constant problem we have. Because the authors, number one, they want to go back and they want to recreate, but they also want to try to fit some of these verses. And I'm not saying don't read them within context, because I think we can still get a lot out of it, you know, but I'm just telling you, Hebrews is a complex book, right? If you haven't noticed, it's difficult and hard to get this. But I think it has great meaning for us in today, because it's just telling us basically to hold to the line, right? Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you look after us this week. In your name we pray, amen.
You're lovely one. Try everything. But it wears you out. Oh my God.